My father used his key to move my pregnant sister-in-law into my house. I called 911 and had him arrested for trespassing. He tried again with a locksmith at 3 a.m. I had him arrested again. I need to start by saying that I never imagined my own father would become the villain in my story. Growing up, he was the man who taught me how to ride a bike, who showed up to every school play, who cried at my college graduation. But people change, or maybe they just reveal who they've always been when circumstances push them hard enough. My name is Amanda, and this happened 6 months ago. I'm 32 years old, a software engineer, and I'd finally saved enough to buy my first house in Sacramento. Nothing fancy, just a modest 3-bedroom ranch with a backyard and a mortgage that made me nervous every month. After years of apartment living, having my own space felt like the ultimate achievement. I had my home office set up in 1 bedroom, a guest room that I painted sage green, and my master suite that overlooked the garden I was slowly learning to maintain. The trouble started with my brother Marcus and his wife Jennifer. Marcus is 4 years younger than me, and he'd always been Dad's golden child. Where I was independent and career-focused, Marcus was the charming one who could talk his way into or out of anything. He married Jennifer 3 years ago, and honestly, I never warmed to her. She had this way of playing helpless that drove me crazy, always needing someone to rescue her from problems she'd created herself. 6 months into their marriage, they bought a house they couldn't afford. Dad had warned them. I'd warned them, but Marcus insisted he was about to get a big promotion that would make everything work out. The promotion never came. Instead, Marcus got laid off from his sales job. And Jennifer, who quit her administrative position because she didn't vibe with her boss, was suddenly 6 months pregnant with nowhere to go when the foreclosure notices started arriving. Dad called me on a Tuesday evening in early March. I was in the middle of debugging a particularly nasty piece of code when my phone rang. "Amanda, honey, we need to talk about Marcus and Jennifer," he said, his voice carrying that tone I'd learned to recognize as the prelude to an unreasonable request. "What about them?" I saved my work and leaned back in my chair. "They're losing the house. The baby's coming in 2 months and they have nowhere to go." "That's awful, Dad. What's their plan?" There was a pause, and I could practically hear him choosing his words carefully. "They need to stay somewhere temporarily just until Marcus finds another job and they can get back on their feet." "Okay, so they're moving in with you and Mom." Another pause. "Your mother's book club has taken over the guest room, and you know how she gets about her space. Besides, we've got the contractors coming next month to renovate the kitchen. It's going to be chaos here." I saw where this was heading and felt my stomach tighten. "Dad, no. Amanda, you have 3 bedrooms. You're living alone in all that space. It's my space." "Dad, I worked incredibly hard to buy this house. It's not a family shelter. She's pregnant." "Amanda, your brother's wife is carrying your niece or nephew, and you're going to let them be homeless." The guilt trip was classic, Dad. He perfected this technique over decades, and it usually worked on me. But something about the way he said it, the assumption that my space was somehow communal property, made me dig in my heels. They're not going to be homeless. There are apartments they can rent, extended stay motel, and frankly, this is a consequence of their own choices. I told Marcus not to buy the house. "So, you're punishing them for making a mistake?" "I'm not punishing anyone. I'm maintaining boundaries. My answer is no." The conversation ended badly, with Dad accusing me of being selfish and me reminding him that I was the only one of his children who'd never asked them for money or a bailout. We didn't speak for a week, which honestly felt like a relief. Here's the thing about boundaries. Some people don't recognize them until they crash into them face first. The following Thursday, I was at work when my phone buzzed with a notification from my security camera. I'd installed the Ring system when I moved in, mostly because the neighborhood had some package theft issues. I pulled up the app expecting to see a delivery driver. Instead, I saw my father's truck in my driveway. My heart started pounding as I watched him get out, walk up to my front door, and pull out a key. My key. The spare key I'd given him for emergencies, explicitly labeled as such. When I handed it over, he promised he understood it was only for emergencies, like if I was out of town and there was a burst pipe or something. He unlocked my door and went inside. I sat frozen at my desk for about 30 seconds, my mind trying to process what I just witnessed. Then I saw Marcus's car pull up. Jennifer got out of the passenger seat, visibly pregnant in a loose dress, and Marcus started unloading boxes from the back. They were moving in. While I was at work, my father had let them into my house so they could move in without my permission. The rage that filled me was unlike anything I'd experienced before. It was cold and sharp and clarifying. I grabbed my phone and my bag, told my manager I had an emergency, and drove home, going probably 15 inches over the speed limit the entire way. When I pulled into my driveway 20 minutes later, Marcus's car was still there, now joined by a U-Haul trailer. The front door was wide open. I could see boxes stacked in my entryway, and I could hear voices coming from inside. I walked in to find Jennifer directing Marcus and Dad as they carried a dresser toward my guest room. My carefully painted sage green sanctuary was being invaded by their bedroom furniture. "What the hell is going on?" My voice came out louder than I'd intended, echoing through the house. All three of them turned to look at me. Jennifer's hand went to her belly in that protective gesture pregnant women do. Marcus had the decency to look uncomfortable. Dad just looked annoyed that I'd interrupted them. "Amanda, calm down," Dad said. "We're just getting them settled." Settled in my house, that I explicitly said they could not stay in. "You're being unreasonable," Dad said, setting down his end of the dresser. "They're family. Family helps each other. Family respects boundaries." I said, "No, Dad." That was a complete sentence. "You don't get to override my decision by using an emergency key that I trusted you with." Jennifer started crying right on cue. "I knew you hated me. I told Marcus you wouldn't want us here, but he kept saying his sister wasn't that cruel." "This has nothing to do with you personally, Jennifer. I would say no to anyone trying to move into my home without permission. This is about consent and respect, neither of which any of you are showing me right now." Marcus finally spoke up. "Amanda, we're desperate. We have nowhere else to go. Just give us a couple of months to figure things out." "A couple of months? You think you're going to find a job, save up for deposits, and find a new place to live in 2 months with a newborn? Be realistic, Marcus. This would turn into 6 months, then a year, then indefinitely, and I would have no recourse because you'd have established residency." Dad shook his head. "You've always been cold, Amanda. Ever since you were a teenager, you've put yourself first. Your mother and I raised you better than this." Something snapped inside me. "You raised me to be independent and self-sufficient. You raised me to work hard for what I want. You raised me to understand that actions have consequences. I learned all of those lessons, Dad. Maybe you should have taught them to Marcus, too." "We're not leaving," Dad said flatly. "Jennifer needs to be off her feet. She's high risk. The stress of moving around isn't good for the baby. You have the room, and this is happening whether you like it or not." The audacity of that statement took my breath away. I looked at the three of them standing in my living room, surrounded by their boxes, basically staging a hostile takeover of my home, and I made a decision. I pulled out my phone and dialed 911. "Amanda, what are you doing?" Marcus asked, his eyes widening. "Calling the police. You're trespassing." "We're family," Jennifer wailed. "You're trespassers." "I did not give you permission to enter my home or move your belongings in. The fact that you're related to me doesn't change that." Dad stepped toward me. "Hang up that phone right now." I stepped back and kept the phone to my ear. When the dispatcher answered, I spoke clearly and calmly. "I need police to come to my residence. My father used the key I gave him for emergencies to let people move into my house without my permission. They're refusing to leave. I want them removed for trespassing." The dispatcher asked for my address and confirmed that the people were still on the property. She told me officers were on their way and to stay on the line if I felt unsafe. I said I'd wait outside and hung up. "You're actually doing this?" Marcus said, looking shocked. "You're having your own father arrested. I'm having a trespasser removed from my property. You made your choices, Marcus. You bought a house you couldn't afford. You both quit or lost your jobs. You didn't make a backup plan. Those are all your decisions, and I'm not obligated to bail you out of the consequences." Jennifer was sobbing now. Traumatic, heaving sobs that would have been more convincing if I hadn't seen her turn them on and off like a faucet during family dinners whenever she wanted something. If something happens to the baby because of the stress, it's on you. What's bad for the baby is having parents who don't plan ahead and who feel entitled to take what isn't theirs. I hope for that kid's sake that you both grow up fast. I walked outside and waited on my front lawn. The neighbors were definitely getting a show. Mrs. Chen from next door was pretending to water plants that were clearly already drenched, and I could see Mr. Rodriguez peering through his living room blinds. Dad came outside, his face red. Amanda Ann, you call them back right now and tell them it was a misunderstanding. It's not a misunderstanding, Dad. You committed a crime. You used a key I gave you in good faith for a purpose I explicitly did not authorize. That's breaking and entering at worst. Trespassing at best. I'm your father. Then act like it. A father respects his daughter's boundaries. A father doesn't manipulate and scheme to get his way. A father doesn't make his daughter feel guilty for having boundaries in the first place. 2 police cars pulled up within 5 minutes. I'd always heard that response times in my neighborhood were good, but I hadn't expected them quite that fast. 2 officers approached, and I explained the situation calmly, while Dad, Marcus, and Jennifer stood on my porch looking like I betrayed them. The officers listened to everyone's story. Dad insisted he had a key, so he had a right to be there. I showed them the text message I'd sent him when I first gave him the key, explicitly stating it was for emergencies only. I showed them my earlier text refusing to let Marcus and Jennifer stay. I showed them the security camera footage of Dad letting himself in while I was at work. The senior officer, whose name tag read, Officer Patterson, turned to my father. Sir, having a key doesn't give you legal right of entry if the homeowner has revoked permission. Miss Mitchell has made it clear that you don't have permission to be here. You need to remove any belongings you've brought in and leave the property. This is ridiculous, Dad sputtered. She's my daughter. That doesn't matter under the law, sir. This is her property, and she's asked you to leave. Dad looked at me with something I'd never seen in his eyes before. It wasn't just anger, it was hatred, cold and sharp. You're dead to me. You understand that? You do this and we're done. I have no daughter anymore. The words should have hurt more than they did. Maybe I was in shock. Maybe I'd already grieved the father I thought I had the moment I saw him unlock my door without permission. If that's how you feel, then leave and give me back my key. For a moment I thought he might refuse, but Officer Patterson stepped closer. Sir, the key. Dad yanked the key ring from his pocket and threw it on the ground at my feet. Then he turned and started hauling boxes back out to Marcus's car. Jennifer was still crying, being comforted by the younger officer, who looked deeply uncomfortable with the whole situation. It took them 40 minutes to remove everything they'd brought in. The officers stayed the entire time, supervising the removal like the world's most awkward moving crew. Neighbors had definitely come out now, some pretending to check their mail, others just openly watching the drama unfold. When the last box was loaded, Marcus paused by his car. I hope you're happy, Amanda. You just made your pregnant sister-in-law homeless. I didn't make you anything, Marcus. You made yourself homeless by buying a house you couldn't afford and then losing your income. Those are your choices, not mine. Every decision you made led to this moment. Own it. They drove away. Dad didn't even look at me as he climbed into his truck and followed them. Officer Patterson handed me a case number. Ma'am, I'd recommend changing your locks tonight just to be safe and maybe consider if there are any other keys out there you need to worry about. Can I press charges? I asked. He hesitated. You could, but given it's family, and the DA would see he had a key, even if his entry was unauthorized. It's unlikely to go anywhere, but the report is filed, and it'll be on record if anything else happens. Anything else? The words stuck with me as I watched the police cars drive away. I went inside, looked at my violated home, my disrupted space, and I felt exhausted. But I also felt something else. Proud. I'd held my boundary. It had been messy and dramatic and probably damaged my family relationships permanently, but I held the line. I called the Locksmith company and paid extra for same-day service. A guy named Tom showed up within 2 hours and changed every lock on the house, including the garage door and the back gate. I gave him a generous tip for the rush job. My mom called that evening. Amanda, how could you do that to your father? Mom, he broke into my house. He had a key, an emergency key that he used without permission. He violated my trust. Jennifer is 7 months pregnant. Amanda, she needs family support. Then she should have thought about that before they made terrible financial decisions. I am not responsible for solving problems that other adults created for themselves. Mom started crying. She'd always been the peacekeeper, the one who smoothed things over, and I just created a conflict she couldn't mediate away. Your father is so hurt. He won't even talk about you. He took down your graduation photos. The graduation photos? That one stung a little. I'm sorry he's hurt, Mom. But what he did was wrong. He didn't respect me or my home or my decisions. I'm allowed to have boundaries, even with family. Especially with family. I just don't understand how you could be so cold. It's not cold to protect myself. Mom, please try to understand that. She hung up without saying goodbye. Over the next few days, I got texts from various aunts and uncles, most of them telling me I'd overreacted, that family was supposed to stick together, but I was being selfish. My cousin Amanda was the only one who sent a supportive message. Good for you for standing your ground. They were way out of line. I thought that was the end of it. Dad had made his dramatic proclamation about down-owning me. Marcus and Jennifer had found somewhere else to go. I later learned they'd moved into Dad's house despite all his protests about Mom's book club and the renovation, and I changed my locks. Crisis resolved. Family fractured. Life moves on. I was wrong. 2 weeks later, on a Saturday night at 3 o'clock in the morning, I woke up to the sound of voices outside my house. I grabbed my phone and pulled up the security camera app, my heart already pounding because nothing good happens at 3 a.m. My father was standing on my porch with a locksmith. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. The locksmith had a drill and was literally starting to work on my front door lock. Dad was standing there with a flashlight, showing him where to drill. The rage from 2 weeks ago came flooding back, but this time it was mixed with disbelief. He'd actually come back after being warned by the police, after the dramatic down-owning, after everything. He'd actually hired a locksmith in the middle of the night to break into my house again. I didn't hesitate this time. I called 911 immediately. This is Amanda Mitchell. I'm calling to report a burglary in progress at my home. My father, who was previously warned by police for trespassing, is currently on my property with a locksmith attempting to break into my house. The dispatcher's tone changed instantly when I said burglary in progress. She kept me on the line, and I could hear her dispatching units with priority. I stayed in my bedroom, door locked, watching the camera feed as the locksmith continued drilling. They actually got the lock open. I watched my father push open my front door like he'd won some kind of victory. The locksmith looked uncomfortable, probably realizing he'd been fed some kind of story that wasn't adding up. Then they both froze because the sound of sirens was suddenly very close, very loud. Red and blue lights flooded my front yard. This time, 4 officers responded. I came downstairs as they were ordering Dad and the locksmith to step away from the door with their hands visible. Officer Patterson was there again. He recognized me immediately. Miss Mitchell, I remember you. Is this the same individual from the previous call? Yes, officer. That's my father. He used the locksmith to break in because I changed the locks after last time. Patterson's jaw tightened as he turned to Dad. Sir, we spoke to you 2 weeks ago about trespassing. You were clearly informed that you didn't have permission to be on this property. Can you explain what you're doing here at 3 a.m. with a locksmith? Dad drew himself up. This is a family matter. My son and his pregnant wife need a place to stay. Amanda is being unreasonable and cruel. As her father, I have a right to make sure my family is taken care of. No, sir, you don't. You have no legal right to enter this property without the owner's permission, regardless of your familial relationship. Breaking and entering is a crime, even if it's your daughter's house. The locksmith, a middle-aged guy who looked like he desperately wanted to be anywhere else, spoke up. He told me it was his house and he'd gotten locked out. Said he'd been staying with family and accidentally left his keys inside. I didn't ask for ID because it was 3 a.m. and he seemed genuine. That's not my father's address. I said he lives across town. He lied to you so you'd break into my house for him. The locksmith's face went pale. I didn't know. I swear I thought it was legitimate. He was calm, had the address. Seemed like a normal lockout. I would never knowingly help someone break into someone else's home. Sir, you're not being charged with anything. Officer Patterson said, but you might want to ask for identification and verify ownership in the future before drilling out someone's lock at 3 a.m. They arrested my father. Not just a warning this time, not just asking him to leave. They put handcuffs on him and read him his rights while he sputtered about family loyalty and ungrateful daughters. They put him in the back of a police car while my neighbors watched from their windows. Before they took him away, he looked directly at me through the car window. You'll regret this, Amanda. You're destroying this family. You destroyed it when you decided your wants were more important than my rights. I said loud enough for him to hear through the glass. They drove him to the county jail. I gave my statement, provided the security footage from both incidents, and Officer Patterson told me, I had a solid case if I wanted to press charges this time. Will it stick? I asked. Given this is the second incident, he was previously warned, and he recruited someone else to help him commit a crime. Yeah, the DA will prosecute this. He's looking at breaking and entering at minimum, possibly burglary, depending on how the prosecutor wants to frame it. I pressed charges. The next 48 hours were surreal. I had to take time off work to deal with everything, which my manager was surprisingly understanding about once I explained the situation in vague terms. Family emergency covered a multitude of sins, and I wasn't ready to admit to my colleagues that I'd had my own father arrested for breaking into my house. I spent Monday morning at the police station going through photos and signing additional paperwork. The detective assigned to my case, a woman named Sarah Vega, who looked to be in her mid-40s, sat down with me in a small interview room that smelled like stale coffee and industrial cleaner. I've seen a lot in this job, Detective Vega said, pulling out a notepad. But family cases are always the hardest. Walk me through the relationship history. Had your father ever shown violent tendencies before? Any history of not respecting your boundaries? I thought about it carefully. Nothing this extreme, but looking back, there were patterns. He always assumed he knew what was best for everyone. When I was in college, I wanted to major in computer science, and he spent months trying to convince me to do business instead because it was more practical for a woman. He'd show up at my apartment unannounced when I was in my 20s, just walk in if I'd left the door unlocked. I'd tell him to call first, and he'd laugh it off. Say parents don't need permission to see their kids. Detective Vega nodded. Writing control issues masked his concern. Classic pattern. What about your brother? Is he typically compliant with your father's wishes? Marcus has always been the favorite. Whatever Dad wanted, Marcus went along with even when it was clearly a bad idea. I paused, remembering something. Actually, when Marcus bought that house they just lost, Dad co-signed the loan. He told me later he'd had reservations about it. But Marcus was so excited and Dad didn't want to crush his dreams. So instead of setting a boundary, Dad enabled him, and now they're both paying for it. And your mother? Where does she fall in all this? Mom's a peacekeeper. She hates conflict. She'll do anything to smooth things over, even if it means asking the person who was wrong to just let it go for the sake of family harmony. I love her, but she's never stood up to Dad in any meaningful way. Detective Vega sat down her pen and looked at me directly. Ms. Mitchell, I want you to understand something. What your father did wasn't just inappropriate family behavior. It was criminal. The fact that he came back a second time after being warned by officers after you changed your locks shows escalation. He hired an outside party and lied to that person to gain entry to your home. That demonstrates planning and intent. What are you saying? I'm saying this pattern could have continued. If you'd backed down after the first incident, if you'd backed down after the second, what would the third incident have looked like? Would he have waited until you were home? Would there have been a confrontation? I've worked domestic cases where family members felt entitled to access someone's home, and it can escalate to dangerous situations. A chill ran through me. I hadn't thought about it in those terms. I've been so focused on the boundary violation that I hadn't considered the physical safety aspect. I'm not trying to scare you, Detective Vega continued, but I am trying to help you understand that taking legal action wasn't an overreaction. It was appropriate and possibly prevented further escalation. I left the police station feeling vindicated, but also shaken. The detective's words kept circling in my mind. What would the third incident have looked like? That afternoon, my doorbell rang. I checked the camera first, a habit I developed, and saw Jennifer standing on my porch, alone, visibly pregnant, looking exhausted. I debated not answering, but curiosity went out. I opened the door, but didn't invite her in, standing in the doorway with my hand on the frame. Amanda, she said, and her voice was different. No tears, no dramatics. She just sounded tired. Can we talk? That depends on what you want to talk about. I wanted to apologize. That caught me off guard. Apologize? Jennifer shifted her weight, one hand supporting her lower back. Can I sit down? Standing for too long makes my back ache. I hesitated, then stepped aside. 5 minutes. She settled onto my couch with a grateful sigh. Up close, I could see the dark circles under her eyes, the strain in her face. Pregnancy was clearly taking its toll. I didn't know what your dad was planning. She started the first time. I mean, Marcus told me that you'd said yes, that you changed your mind about us staying here. I believed him because I wanted to believe him. We were desperate, and I didn't ask too many questions, but you knew I'd initially said no. Yeah, and I should have insisted on hearing it from you directly. I let Marcus convince me that it was fine, that family works things out, that you'd come around. She looked down at her hands. I've been doing that a lot lately, letting other people make decisions for me, going along with plans that sound good without thinking about the consequences. Why are you telling me this? Because you were right about all of it. Marcus and I made terrible decisions. We bought a house we couldn't afford because everyone around us was buying houses, and we didn't want to feel left behind. I quit my job over a personality conflict that I could have worked through. Marcus turned down a stable position for a riskier sales job with higher commission potential that never panned out. And instead of facing our mistakes and dealing with them, we've been looking for other people to rescue us. I sat down in the chair across from her, surprised by this admission. What changed? Living with your parents changed. Your dad is furious all the time. He takes it out on everyone, but especially on Marcus. He brings up the house constantly. How if Marcus had listened to him, none of this would have happened. Never mind that he co-signed the loan. It's all Marcus's fault, and he makes sure Marcus knows it. Your mom tries to keep the peace, but she's stressed too, and I'm stuck in the middle of it. Almost 8 months pregnant now, watching my husband get torn down daily by his own father. She looked up at me with something that might have been respect. You got out. You set boundaries and enforce them even when it cost you. Marcus tells me stories about growing up, about how your dad was always controlling, always had to have the final say. But you're the only one who ever really stood up to him. It doesn't feel like winning, I admitted. Maybe not, but it's better than what we have. Marcus and I have been actually talking, for the first time in months. We can't keep living like this. We need to figure out our own way forward without expecting your dad or anyone else to save us. She struggled to her feet. I'm not asking you for anything. I just wanted you to know that what happened wasn't your fault. You had every right to protect your home and your boundaries. I'm sorry we put you in that position. After she left, I sat on my couch for a long time processing the conversation. It didn't change what had happened. It didn't make the hurt or the family fracture any less real, but it shifted something in me, knowing that at least one person understood. The next day, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. When I answered, a professional voice introduced herself as Laura Morrison, a reporter for the Sacramento Bee. Miss Mitchell, I'm working on a story about family boundary issues and the legal system. I understand you recently had a family member arrested for trespassing. Would you be willing to speak with me about your experience? My stomach dropped. How did you get my name? Public records. The arrest report and subsequent charges are part of the public record. I'm interested in exploring the broader issue of family entitlement and how the legal system handles domestic boundary violations. I'm not interested in being part of a news story. I understand this is sensitive, but your case highlights an important issue that many people face. Family members who feel entitled to override someone's autonomy and the difficulty of enforcing boundaries with people you're related to. Your story could help others in similar situations. Or it could turn me into a viral villain, where everyone judges me for having my father arrested. No, thank you. Laura was persistent. I could keep your name anonymous if you prefer, but I think there's value in showing that enforcing boundaries, even with family, is sometimes necessary. The fact that your father came back a second time shows a pattern that could help illustrate. I hung up. Then I immediately called Detective Vega. Is there any way to keep this out of the press? I asked, after explaining about the reporter's call. The arrest itself is public record, she said, but you're not obligated to speak to any reporters. If she contacts you again, just decline to comment. Most likely, without your cooperation, she won't have enough for a compelling story, and she'll move on to something else. She was right. Laura Morrison called twice more over the next few days, and I declined both times. Eventually, the calls stopped. I checked the Sacramento Bee's website obsessively for a week, but no story ever appeared. Meanwhile, the family pressure continued mounting. My Uncle Robert, Dad's older brother, showed up at my house on Thursday evening. I saw him through the camera and considered not answering, but Uncle Robert had always been relatively reasonable. I opened the door. I'm not here to yell at you, he said, holding up his hands, but I do want to talk. Can I come in? We sat in my living room, and Uncle Robert studied me for a long moment. "Your grandmother would have been proud of you," he finally said. That was not what I'd expected. "What?" "My mother, your dad's mom, she was a firecracker. Didn't take any nonsense from anyone, including my father, which was unusual for women of her generation. Your dad gets his stubbornness from her. But somewhere along the way, he forgot the other half of what she taught us. That strength means knowing when to stand your ground, but also knowing when you're in the wrong. Dad thinks he was helping Marcus. Oh, I know what your dad thinks. He's been calling me daily, ranting about how ungrateful you are, how you've destroyed the family, how he was just trying to help his son. But here's what I told him, and what I'll tell you. He was wrong. Dead wrong. That house is yours. You worked for it. You bought it. And what he did was criminal, not metaphorically, literally criminal. I felt tears pricking at my eyes. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. I'm going to give you some hard truth, too. This family drama, it's going to last for years. Your dad isn't going to apologize. He's constitutionally incapable of admitting when he's wrong, especially about something this big. Your mother is going to keep trying to reconcile you, too, which means she's going to keep pressuring you to be the one who backs down. Marcus and Jennifer are going to struggle, and every time they do, someone in the family is going to bring up how you could have prevented it. That's not exactly encouraging. I'm not trying to encourage you. I'm trying to prepare you. Standing your ground is the right thing to do, but it's not the easy thing. There's going to be a cost, and you need to accept that cost and decide it's worth it. Is it? I thought about Detective Vega's question about what the third incident might have looked like. I thought about my father's face when he threw my keys at my feet, the hatred in his eyes. I thought about the peace I'd felt in my home before all of this, and the violation I'd felt watching him unlock my door without permission. "Yes," I said firmly, "it's worth it." Uncle Robert nodded. "Good. Then stick to your guns and know that not everyone in the family thinks you're the villain here. We're just quieter than the ones who do." After he left, I realized that the support, when it came, was often quiet and private. People didn't want to publicly go against Dad, but they'd reach out individually to let me know they understood. It wasn't the sweeping family vindication I might have hoped for, but it was something. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks out. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Diana Chen, met with me beforehand to go over my testimony. "This should be straightforward," she said. "We have the police reports from both incidents, the security footage, the locksmith statement. Your father's attorney will try to paint this as a family misunderstanding, lean heavily on the 'her poor father' angle, but legally he doesn't have a leg to stand on. Will I have to testify? Probably not. His attorney knows the evidence is overwhelming. I'm expecting him to take the plea deal we've offered, but if he insists on going to trial, yes, you'll need to testify." The thought of sitting in a courtroom facing my father, having to recount everything in front of strangers, made my stomach turn. And if he takes the plea, then it's over. He'll be sentenced, serve his home detention, and the restraining order will be put in place. You won't have to see him or speak to him. "That should make me happy," I said. "So why do I feel terrible?" Diana Chen's expression softened. "Because he's your father, and some part of you still wants him to be the dad you remember from childhood. But that version of him, if he ever fully existed, isn't who he is now. The man who broke into your house twice isn't operating from a place of love. He's operating from a place of control." My phone started ringing at 6 a.m. on the day of the preliminary hearing. It was Mom, hysterical. "Your father is in jail, Amanda. In jail!" "How could you let this happen?" "I didn't let anything happen, Mom. He broke into my house again. After being warned by police, he hired a locksmith to drill out my locks at 3 in the morning. He's your father. And I'm his daughter, and he's supposed to respect me. Why is his relationship to me more important than mine to him? Why do I have to accept being violated and disrespected because we're related?" She didn't have an answer for that. She just kept crying and telling me I needed to drop the charges. When I refused, she hung up on me. Marcus called an hour later. "Amanda, you have to drop the charges. Dad could go to prison. Dad could have not broken into my house twice. He was trying to help us. Jennifer's pregnancy is getting harder. The doctor wants her taking it easy. We need stability, and you have the space." "That's not my problem, Marcus. It was never my problem. You created this situation, and now you're all trying to make it my responsibility to fix it. I'm done being the family scapegoat. You're tearing the family apart. No, I'm holding people accountable for their actions. There's a difference, even if you can't see it. The legal process moved faster than I expected. Dad was arraigned, pleaded not guilty, and was released on bail that Mom paid by taking out a loan against their house. The prosecutor offered him a plea deal. Plead guilty to attempted burglary, serve 6 months of home detention with an ankle monitor, 3 years of probation, and a restraining order prohibiting him from coming within 500 feet of me or my property. According to Marcus, who called to yell at me about it, Dad wanted to take it to trial, insisting that no jury would convict a father trying to help his family. His lawyer apparently told him that with the police reports, the security footage, and the testimony of the locksmith, who'd since realized he'd been duped, he would absolutely be convicted and would likely face actual jail time rather than home detention. Dad took the plea deal. The family split cleanly down the middle. Mom, Marcus, Jennifer, and most of Dad's side of the family stopped speaking to me entirely. Several aunts and uncles sent me messages ranging from disappointed to outright hostile. I was called cold, heartless, cruel, selfish, and unforgiving. One uncle told me I should be ashamed to call myself a Christian, which was particularly ironic, since I'd never claimed to be one. But my cousin Amanda stood by me. So did my mom's sister, Aunt Carol, who sent me a long email about how proud she was that I'd stood up for myself. A few cousins from Mom's side reached out privately to say they supported me, even if they couldn't do so publicly because of the family drama. Jennifer had her baby about 6 weeks later, a girl they named Scarlett. I found out through Facebook, not through any personal announcement. The comments on the birth announcement were full of people congratulating them and making pointed remarks about real family and people who actually care. I didn't engage. I just hid the post and moved on with my life. Dad served his home detention. According to the family grapevine that still occasionally reached me through Amanda, he was bitter and angry the entire time, insisting he'd been railroaded by an ungrateful daughter and an overzealous prosecutor. He never once, as far as I heard, acknowledged that he'd done anything wrong. The restraining order is still in effect. I renewed it when it came up for extension, and I'll keep renewing it as long as I can. Dad has made no attempt to contact me, but according to Amanda, he talks about me at family gatherings, always as the villain in his story, the cold-hearted daughter who put him in jail for trying to help his son. Marcus and Jennifer are still living with my parents. The temporary arrangement is approaching a year now. Jennifer got a part-time job at a retail store, and Marcus is doing some kind of contract work that doesn't pay well. They're not making enough to save for their own place, especially now with a baby. Dad complains about them being there, but refuses to kick them out, probably because it would undermine his narrative that they desperately needed help. Me, I'm doing great. My house is still mine. My space is still protected, and I've learned something valuable about boundaries and family. I've learned that just because people are related to you doesn't mean they have the right to violate your autonomy. I've learned that protecting yourself isn't selfish, even when people tell you it is. I've learned that sometimes the family you choose is more supportive than the family you're born into. I've also learned to be very selective about who gets keys to my house. These days, only Amanda has one, and even that took me months to feel comfortable with. Sometimes late at night, I wonder if I overreacted. If I should have just let them stay for a few months, if keeping the peace would have been easier than dealing with the fallout of holding firm. But then, I remember watching my father unlock my door without permission, seeing him direct Marcus and Jennifer to move into my space like it was his to give away. And I know I made the right choice. You can't compromise on whether someone has the right to violate your boundaries. Either they respect you or they don't. My father chose not to respect me, twice. He chose his pride and his golden child's convenience over his daughter's autonomy. Those were his choices, not mine. The restraining order expires in 2 years. I'll renew it. Not out of anger, not anymore, but because I've built a life that feels safe and secure, and I'm not willing to risk that safety for people who've proven they don't respect it. My coworker asked me recently if I regretted having my father arrested. I thought about it for a while before answering. I regret that it was necessary, I finally said. I regret that he put me in a position where that was the only way to protect myself. But I don't regret doing it. I'd do it again, and I would every time, because I finally learned the lesson that took me 32 years to understand. Sometimes the bravest, most loving thing you can do is refuse to set yourself on fire to keep someone else warm, even if that someone is family.